I've been a pastor for just over a year, but I've been in youth ministry for over 15 years. And when I became a pastor of a church, being the main spiritual person over the church, the senior pastor, the lead pastor, the main keeper of the vision and the direction of the church, I wanted to seek guidance. And I sat down with another pastor. I'm a pastor of a very large church of over 4,000 people. And he said something to me that has stuck with me. And he says, you as the pastor, you as the senior pastor, has to be the resident theologian of that church. And maybe being naive or whatever, I was just saying, yeah, whatever, But I've really thought about that the past year. What does it mean to be the resident theologian of the church? Well, one, we just finished up this whole looking at the theology of purpose-driven. I think and I tell you, I am still learning. I'm still growing, and as I learn and grow, I tend to lean more into a reformed theological position. But I don't have it all figured out. I don't think I ever will. I'm still a work in progress. I'm still learning and growing. But we just looked at the theology of the purpose-driven. I said, I like the purpose-driven church, the philosophy. There's a structure there, ministry-wise, a ministry structure for effectiveness. And we have to be effective in the gospel. But beyond that, as a resident theologian, you don't copy the programs or you don't copy the formulas to make a church grow. I've learned being a resident theologian, I adhere to the Scripture. I look to the Scripture first and have things line up with the Scripture. I learn and I grow. Being a resident theologian says, I'm not going to copy a program or formula, but I'm going to understand the theological, biblical principles behind the structure, behind the philosophy. That serves the church well. Resident theologian also, what they do is you can become a better preacher of the gospel because you're learning and growing. Now you look at my preaching calendar and things, I take topics and series from other churches that are free there to take, and it spurs on creativity. But then I dig deeper into the Scripture, and my prayer is that I can continue to learn and grow as an expositional preacher, where I take the theological principles found in Scripture and communicate them to everyday life. That's what a theologian does, is to understand those things. So you're not, and my biggest pet peeve is pulpit plagiarism, where pastors, you're seeing pastors just really regurgitate other people's sermons. And they're not there to regurgitate and say, they are there to spur your creativity. If you use PowerPoint, grab their graphics and here's what they've done, and maybe you want to take it in a different direction. It spurs on your creativity, but you still have to dig deep and kind of wrestle with the text and everything. So and that's another topic that we're going to talk about is pulpit plagiarism. But being a resident theologian, you don't run into that because you're committed to learning and growing yourself. Also, when people come for advice, you can, or whatever, you have a theological base to counsel them and give them the whole counsel of Scripture. Being a resident theologian, you don't pick and choose which scriptures to use and to repeat. You take the whole counsel of Scripture, and it becomes a more holistic approach to leadership, really. And so, being a resident theologian, it's huge, and I'm only scratching the surface here. But I'm still learning and growing. What does it mean to be a resident theologian? It also means that you're committed to getting an education, formal education. I I keep calling above the education. If you are called to go into the ministry, if you're called to do it, then pursue the education, and through the education, that calling is affirmed. It's not, oh, I'm going to get the education and hope to get the calling. No, if you have a calling on your life, you're going to do what it takes to get the bachelor's, the master's, and the doctorate. Now, hey, I'm finishing up my master's. I'm so glad I did. And it has affirmed my calling as a pastor, and also has put me on the track to learn more theology, to dig deeper. And it has given me the tools to do so. If you're called to be a leader of a church, man, go for that education. It's a whole affirmation of calling. And when you do, you're equipped through it. So a resident theologian continues their education, their formal education, as far as they can take it, or as far as they feel that God is calling them to take it. So, it's not just getting a bachelor's and copying other programs, or this church does this, so we're going to do it. And there's a lot of resources. You can get a resource overload out there. But a theologian, a resident theologian for a church, filters everything through the Word and saying, you know what, this is what we're going to be about, or this is what we're going to be about. You can grab those principles, but it's what's the theology behind it. You can equip people. You can make better disciples when you're the resident theologian. There's so many benefits. This is so huge. And we have lost this notion of resident theologian in the North American church. It's easy to copy other people. It's easy to say, hey, here's this formula over here. This church is 10,000 people, and so we're going to copy their formula and see what happens here. No. Being a resident theologian, I love the term that I just heard this morning. It's fidelity to the Scripture. That we are just committed to that. And so that's what a resident theologian does. It's continuing learning. Learning about theology and learning about God, not necessarily just copying programs. So the church today needs more resident theologians than they have copycats. That's my personal opinion. And like I said, I don't have it all figured out. I'm not going to give everybody all the answers, but I continue to learn and grow in this process. And I'm so glad that the Lord is teaching me and equipping me and encouraging me through this, because if I didn't have that, I would just be another copycat, and that wouldn't be God pleasing at all. To God be all the glory for what He's doing in the church today.